Gemara is all about problem solving. Most people, if you ask them what Gemara is, they won't even know. That's rather interesting. But Gemara is about problem solving because the essential element of Gemara is a sugya. And what's a sugya? A sugya is the total treatment that is given over to the resolution of a problem. There you are. That's what a sugya is. So therefore every sugya has a problem. It has the treatment process, which is shakvataya, which is called argumentation, and then it has a maskona, which is the answer, the resolution to the original problem. New problem, new sugya. And that, therefore Gemara is a different type of thinking if you want to employ a certain method. Yediyas, however, which is halachas, is different. And so therefore we take Mishnayos because Mishnayos offers Yediyas, and it offers Yediyas in a more general way, klal. So therefore Mishnayos has the advantage, especially when somebody learns the process of thinking. It's always good to learn on data, information, as opposed to debate. We've been learning brachas, so we're figuring out what to change. By the way, the beginning, a lot of the Masechta of Rosh Hashanah is really Kiddush HaChodesh. Are you aware of that?
We did some. I mean, we summarized it sometime.
Did we?
We had a couple of shurim in it, yeah.
We had a couple of?
Couple of shurim,
Yeah. I remember. So, I don't know. So what do you think? You want to do continue brachas?
No.
What?
No.
Who? No?
Yes.
Yeah.
No means you don't want to continue brachas.
No, just to go for a change. It's a good.
Oh, you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, but again, I mean, if Oilam wants brachas,
I thought it was a good idea. So, what is suggestions? What would you like to do? Which masechet would you like to engage in? So I had to get. You said Rosh Hashanah. We did.
I'm above a comma.
Bava Kama?
we did also by a good extent, but it was well ago, 5-6 years ago probably we did it. Not the whole thing. I mean, we didn't, but I'm just. We went to Tomazik, all kind of restructured it, kind of stuff.
Oh, you remember that? Yeah, it's a long time ago.
Basra maybe. Basra, Bamatia, Kedushin. I mean,
whole chance.
I mean, anything. I mean, that's, we should do Goral.
Who?
We should do Goral.
Let me just see. Well, in terms of what this is all about, okay? And then we'll go into it, First idea. The mind, when it seeks to understand, it's called the intellect. The intellect is that aspect of the mind which seeks to understand, and it engages in a process called reasoning. Fine. There are two things that go on in reasoning. Yeah, I have this English. There are two things that go on in terms of reasoning. One, and what I'm about to tell you is very important. Hello? Who told you about this year? He did. Who told you?
He used to come in Sunday tomorrow.
Oh, okay. This shiur is about how to develop a mahalach, a Derech Iyun. Okay? And it's really all about, it includes the Brisker Derech. It's a shiur devoted to thinking and how to develop a Derech Iyun. That's what this shiur is. As such, we use Mishnah to develop that idea. Because Gemara, as I said before, is a different type of limud. Gemara is about problem solving. That's what Gemara really is. When Rav Ashi wrote Torah Shabbat Peh, he had several choices, right? He decided to write Torah Shabbat Peh in the format of a sugya, right? What's the sugya? I defined the sugya. How do you define a sugya? Do you know? By the way, this is a class, not a lecture, which means your intervention is very important. Okay? What was the definition of a sugya? Right? What would you say is a sugya? By the way, which is very important, whatever you say is acceptable. It doesn't make a difference what you say. Never think that what you're going to say is a klutz kasha or a klutz answer. You have to feel comfortable in saying anything. You may not be right. However, you can always be safe. It's a very important environment for learning to proceed. Safety. Right? Ein habayishin loimed. Why? Because he doesn't feel safe. That's why. Very important environment. In fact, of all the things necessary for learning to take place, safety is the most important. Or else you don't ask anything and you just are afraid. Anyway, as I said, Gemara is fundamentally what? Gemara is fundamentally a format of problem solving. That's what Rav Ashi did. So therefore, Gemara is nothing more than a collection or a series of sugyas. That's all it is. Right? And mamorim. There are two things that make up a Gemara. What's a sugya? The definition of a sugya is the total treatment that is given over toward the resolution of a problem. Every sugya introduces a problem. Minohanimili, Mantana, right? Iboyilahu, Vermini, contradiction. There's always a problem. And the Gemara then seeks to answer that problem. That's the whole point of the sugya. And then the Gemara answers it and it arrives at a maskana, usually. A maskana, and that's it. A new problem, new sugya. That's basically, so that's what Rav Ashi did. Now Rav Ashi didn't have to do that. He could have written the Gemara not like a sugya, which is problem. He could have given you the answers. Right? No questions. No questions, no treatment, just the answers. Who did that?
Rush.
Who?
The Rush did it.
The Rosh? You mean Shimshon Misirilio? You mean the commentary on Zeroim?
No, the Rush. No, the
The Rosh.
The Rush.
Oh, okay, yeah. The Rosh, to a certain extent, yeah. But who really did that? Who really shines out? Who?
The Rambam.
The Rambam.
The Rambam.
The Rambam wrote every maskon in Shas. That's what, he skipped the questions and he skipped the treatment. He wrote out a sefer that has every maskona. That's why the Rambam is so choshev and so on. In any case, so that's what Gemara. I don't do Gemara because it involves argumentation or debate thinking, the logic of the flow of the debate, and I don't want to get into that. First, you have to really understand how to analyze an idea. In this case, a halacha. So, what's a halacha? What's the definition of a halacha? We know. What's the definition of a halacha? Anybody know? I've said it. You guys know. What's the definition of halacha? Right? What's a halacha? How do you define it?
Law.
Who?
A law.
No, a law is a translation, not a definition. Right? A translation is when you take a Hebrew word and you give its English parallel. A definition is what is it.
It's a mode of conduct for a given circumstance.
Yeah, what mode of conduct. A halacha is the required behavior in a given situation. There you are. So it has two components. What is the situation and what's the required behavior? There you are. That's a definition. So therefore what we do is take halachas and learn how to think about halacha. Now, as I said, there are two things going on when you learn. When the mind thinks, it's doing two things. It's analyzing and it's synthesizing. To analyze means to break it down into its parts. To synthesize means to connect it to everything else and put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. A jigsaw puzzle is classic synthesis because you got to put the whole thing together, right? And so on, And analysis is if you look at something, you break it down into its parts. Two different types of thinking. Okay. And therefore, both are required in thinking about halachas. Unfortunately, most people don't do that. They are involved in what's called analysis. They break down. The Brisker Derech is a classic Derech that it's fundamentally all about analysis. It's all about it, but it's certainly it certainly does analysis and so on. So that's very important to know. Okay. Now, most people, and this is a very important idea, when most people think, they think what's called deductively. What's a deduction? You're given the klal and you deduce the prat. Right? You have a klal, a general rule. And from the general rule, you figure out what a special case, a specific particular or case that comes from the rule. You know, when the Mishnah says Zeh HaKlal, it's giving you a general rule, right? And then it gives you a specific case, right? A case that is an illustration of or example of that klal. You see. Okay. That's called deductive reasoning. There's another type of reasoning, and most people do that. They look at a klal and they try to figure out, well, what some of the examples, what are some of the pratim and so on, you know. The reverse of that is called inductive reasoning. Inductive is if you have a prat and you got to figure out the klal. Much harder. You see. It's much harder to look at a rule, at a prat, and figure out where does it fit. What's its klal? Yet the secret of synthesis is really inductive. You need to look at a prat and figure out what the klal is. You see. Most people do not think inductively. They don't think that way. Most people are into fragments, which means that they never see the whole picture. They never see it. So all they have is a little piece. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, and I give you a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and all you do is look at the pieces. But why? If I give you a jigsaw puzzle, what's the first thing you have to ask? Where's the box? Where's the picture? Because each piece, even though it has a meaning in and of itself, really is meaningless unless it's connected to everything else. You see. So therefore, you are having a lot of pieces or fragments and putting it together in a whole. That's called inductive reasoning, and most people do not do this, you know. So therefore, in order to achieve clarity, you need to do two things. You need to analyze, break it down, and you need to synthesize, put it together with everything else. In fact, all you have to ask is two questions about anything, and you know everything about that thing. The first question is, what is it? And the second question is, to what does it belong? How does it connect with everything else? If you have those two pieces of information, you are clear about what this thing is. Amazing. That's all you have to really know, is those two ideas. Okay? So, you're always learning pratim. And from that, you need to analyze the prat, which is one way of going. And the second thing is to put the pratim together to make a klal, or a structure. Yes? How does it sound so far?
Give an example of what you're saying.
Example of inductive reasoning?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
We're going to do it in the Mishnah, no?
What was that?
We're going to do it in the Mishnah, no?
Yeah, no, we'll do it, yeah. Of course, you know. Well, for instance, you know, let's say eat broccoli. Okay? So what's the bracha on broccoli? Adama. That's the prat. That's halacha. If you go and eat broccoli, you need to make boyer pri adama. What's the klal?
Vegetables.
Anything that grows from the ground.
You make boyer pri adama. You've just induced something. You see. That was quite simple, you know. And so, what are you learning now? Or what are you learning? What, the Masechta or whatever?
Bracha. Oh, what am I learning
Yeah.
personally?
Yeah.
Yivam.
Yavamas. Fabulous. What's a Yavama? Really? What is a Yavama? So you need to look at the prat, right? When you look at a prat and you want to analyze it, what are you going to do? How do you analyze this? Right? So, you need to know a definition. The first thing you always have to ask about anything is, what is it? That's called a definition. You know what I'm saying? Then, once you have the definition of something, You now understand what this is. Then what you need to do is to take a look at the hafchonas of the thing, the categories. You see. Once you have its categories, then you know its definition, and you know the different things that make up the thing. You see, for instance, a table. What is a table? You know, how would you define a table? What is it?
Table.
Well,
A structure that you eat out of, I don't know.
that you eat out of?
You
No.
eat out.
A table is a...
So this is not a table then.
Because we're not eating on it, right? No. A table fundamentally is what? It is a horizontal surface in which an individual can place things on top of. Now, then you have to distinguish between a table and a desk. A different story. But a table is a horizontal surface. That's what it essentially is, and therefore you can place things on top of it. You know what I'm saying? If I ask you what's a bookcase, what would you answer? What's its definition?
It's a table for books.
It's a table for books. Almost. A bookcase is what? Is a device that enables you to store books. Now, if I ask you to induce that, what is a bookcase part of? What is a table part of? What's the larger category, the larger class of table or bookcase? What would you answer?
Furniture.
Exactly, there you are. You see the difference? So not only do you know a prat, which is a table or a bookcase, you know the klal. It's all furniture. You see, so it's a much greater havana. You see. So let's go back to Yavama. What's a Yavama? How do you define a Yavama?
A woman whose husband died with no children.
Say that again?
A woman whose husband died with no children.
Have no. Okay, so it's a woman whose husband died, has no kids. Fine. But in halacha, how would you define Yavama? You're right. That identifies the type of person she is. But if you look at it in terms of the halacha, what would you say?
There's a commandment to do yibum.
So therefore, a woman.
To do.
Okay. So a woman whose husband died and she is childless has specific obligations, right? Namely, to marry a brother-in-law or the husband's brother. You see? So you have defined a yavama, both what type of a person it is and what's the uniqueness about a yavama. You see? Now, if I ask you now, what's the klal of yavama? Where does it fit into the larger category? What would you say?
No, it's exception. It's exception to the rule, so it doesn't fit anyway.
Yeah, wait. What would you say? You see what I'm asking you? We now understand what yavama is. We understand what it is and her uniqueness. Who?
He said Arias was the exception of the Arias.
Wait. So what's the larger klal? That what? What'd you say?
Marriage.
No. What's the? You said something very important. What was the word?
I said Arias.
Oh, she's an erva, really. So therefore, right? So therefore, the class that she belongs is really an erva, Arias.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So what type of an erva is she? Is yourself. There you are. So immediately we understand that when we talk about the Yavama, we're really talking about an erva. That's the klal. This is a certain type of erva, right? So immediately we see two things going on. What she is, but really, where does she belong? You see. Now, why then do we care about a Yavama if she's an erva? You know what I'm saying? What's special about a Yavama, really? So what you're really saying is what? The mitzvah creates the obligation. But what are you really saying about Yavama?
She's an exceptional erva.
She's what?
An exceptional erva.
Yes, she's a deviation. Because an erva simply means somebody that is forbidden to marry, basically. But she's a deviation, or an exception, you see. So therefore, we begin to understand, right, what the klal is, that she's really an erva, and that this erva is a deviation from the normal arayas. You see. In what way does she deviate? That the is not nogea, that you can actually marry this woman. You see what I'm saying? But so what do we have now? We have a klal and we have a prat. You see. Now we can go further into that. What is the principle of why she deviates? What allows her to deviate? What would you say?
The Torah is mitzvah.
That's the origin. What is the principle? How do we know she can deviate? Because that's what the Torah says. But the Torah creates something. It creates what's called a principle, a yisoid. And it's that yisoid which the Torah creates, which is the subject of Yevomas. What would you say that is? What's the major principle that allows her to deviate from the normal case of erva?
Zika.
Who?
Zika.
Bingo. Zika. Zika is the determinant, is the principle that allows the deviation to occur. You see, and the Torah is machadish that. So the Torah is the origin of that, and Zika is the principle. You see? So what is Zika? Yevomas is nothing more than the study of what?
I don't know what you're expecting me to say.
Yevomas is the study of the different cases in which Zika varies. Yevomas is nothing more about Zika and how it varies from different situations. So in situation A, is there Zika? And on who is it? Situation B, or case B, what happens to the Zika? Situation C, what happens to the Zika? You see? So collectively, the Yevomas basically deals with Zika and its variations in terms of the cases. You see? What kind of cases are there in Yevomas? And remember, when you talk about cases, you build it simple to the complex. And that's how you see it grows. That's how you develop what's called a pattern. So what's the simplest case? Woman, husband dies, no kids. Yes? Brother-in-law, Yovam. Zika. Great. Next case. Woman, husband dies, no kids. Yes?
There's a Torah.
And there's a co-wife. What happens to the Zika? Third case. Woman, husband dies, no kids. Actually, there was a case before that. Let's look at it this way. Woman, husband dies, no kids. What happens to the Zika? That's one. Next case. Woman, husband dies, no kids. And she is an erva, not mitzad eshes och. She herself is another type of erva. That's case 2. You see how we build? Next case. Woman, husband dies, no kids, right? And there's a co-wife. Third case. What happens to the Zika? Who is the one? Fourth case. Woman, husband dies, no kids, tzara, but the tzara alone is an erva. Look, what am I doing? I'm sequencing a bunch of cases, but logically, clearly. And what am I looking at? What happens to the Zika? You see? Fifth case. By the way, that Mishnah is all about the fourth case.
But Torah is an erva.
The Chamesh Esrei Noshim, Poitris, and so on. And then you can add a fifth case. Again, woman, husband dies, no kids, 3 wives. You see? And only one of them is an erva. And so on. Okay, so we finished with that. Now we go into a new situation. Woman, Husband dies, yes, right, childless. One brother-in-law, two brother-in-laws, etc. You see, so you develop the cases on both sides. But we're always looking to do what? We want to organize from the simple to the complex all the cases, right? And what happens to the fundamental principle, which is called the zika? What happens to the zika in case A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So when you're learning Yevamos, ultimately, what are you going to do? You're going to create a structure. And that's really what it's about. You're going to create a structure of the simple to the complex, all the cases, and what happens to the zika, you see. Now, if you can, why does this happen to the zika? That's the principle of the principle. What determines the movement of zika? So that's a principle of a principle.
What's the definition of Zika?
Zika means a bond or an obligation. It's really an obligation, but it's a bond. Zokuk.
But,
She's bound to
Definition,
you.
what's the definition?
What was that?
What's the definition?
no, I know what it is, but I'm just saying, how do we define it?
How do we define zika?
Yeah, because it's a principle, but really it's a word. I mean, it's just replacement. You know, we replace one word with the other word. It's not replacement.
No. That's what I'm saying. What
It's
zika
not- it's
in the
not-
case of Yevama, right, means a Torah connection or bond that is created because of a certain situation that obligates her
Oh, I see.
to deal with the zika. Either you follow it through or you negate or dissolve the zika through chalitza. You see?
Zika is something which
She
shifts, puts away the error, right? I mean, the Yisur, it takes away the Yisur.
yeah, zika, yeah,
Comes through.
exactly. So in that, what we really we're looking at all the cases organized, and then we're looking at the zika, how it changes. You see, and what's the principle of why it changes and so on, you know, and so ultimately come out an entire structure of Yevamos, you know.
Isn't Zika really some aspect of Bialus?
Well, the question is
It's like a deviation
okay,
of Bialus, no?
a deviation of Bialus.
It's like a part. It's like a.
Whose Bialus
It's like
is deviating?
incomplete. It's like there's an incomplete Bialus because there's that tie to a certain potential bow.
Yeah, so where did this all originate from? What's the origin of this whole business, this whole case of
Well, first you
Zika
have a
and
Bialus,
Yevamos
you
and so on?
break up Bialus, and through that breaking of the Bialus creates another potential.
What? You have to be more specific.
There was a Bialus between the Ish and the Isha.
You mean the husband,
The husband, right?
the one who died?
Right.
Yes, there was an Ishus, a Bialus, yes.
Right.
That's right.
His death breaks that Bialus.
And transfers to the brother. That's
Well,
what he's saying.
yeah,
Right.
That's what you're saying.
Right. Well.
That Bible
Well,
transfers
it's I don't know if
automatically to a
it's,
brother.
I don't know if there's
what transfers?
right. It's not exactly a full Bialus.
What
It's-
transfers?
It's like
Bialus?
Million-dollar question.
The relationship.
Well, you know.
that's what the Zika is.
Well, that's the question. Is Zika a form of Bialus? You know, where he has to exercise. In other words, is it a form of Bialus? In what way? Because she can't go out and get married without doing
Yeah,
this.
releasing
Because
her.
he either has
Unless
to
he-
because he either has to complete the Bialus or he has to break the Bialus.
Yeah, or you releases her.
Yeah, but it's
right?
not really Bialus
So-
because there's no get. It's a very specialized case. So we can't say it's Bialus. It's not
Well,
much Bialus.
why
It is
not?
the
Big-
hus- the brother's marriage
he
transfers
has
to
he
him.
has
Yes, regular
he
Bialus
still-
is good. I mean, there's no
he still controls her life, whether
Yeah,
he
but in a
wants to
different way, in a
complete
di-
it or when he wants to destroy it.
still in a
you
different
know,
way.
it's-
Still in a different way. It's not 100%.
It's like a
It's not how
it's
it
like a
used to
Hetzi
be.
Bialus.
Well, it's not equal to the original of Ishus. It's not equal to the original.
It's specialized
husband.
deviation, whatever it is. It's something.
But it is a form of control. And what's the definition of Bialus? Bialus is what? What's the definition of Bialus? Right? What is the definition of Bialus? Don't tell me ownership, because ownership is a translation.
No, it's the control.
So what is Bialus really? Wait. Let me look at the.
Sorry.
Because, you know, what is Bialus? Everybody knows what Bialus is, right? But what is it? What?
Right.
A right? A right? Are you right?
No.
So which right do you mean?
Only by the person's rights. That's what you mean?
Alright.
A right to do what? You need to say what. A right means what? You know, a right to do what? Kill?
In this case, the issues they get in Yonam.
What is Bailis in general? Then we'll worry about what it is in Ishus. What is Bailis in general?
Ownership.
Who? No. Don't use the word ownership. That's a translation. That is not permitted. We need a definition. So what is Bailis?
Because I own it.
No. Not because you own it. Don't tell me what the concept. Do not tell me what
I'm
the
not
concept.
trained like these guys are trained.
Yeah, no. Yeah, you are trained. You've been how many years in learning Gemara? Long time. So you are trained.
It's nothing you haven't heard of before.
Yeah.
You
In
know
fact, when I tell you, there's nothing I will tell you that you didn't know first. You know. So the definition of Bailis would be, Bailis is a legal state. It's not a real thing. It's not what you can touch. Bailis is a legal state, right, in which an individual has rights of control over an object. So the right that you refer to is control. You can do whatever you want with that object. And it's legal. It's not a real thing. Nobody ever saw Bailis walking around. You know what I'm saying? It's a legal concept, right? That gives you the rights of control over a given object. That's what a Baal is. Ishus is a form of Bailis. Because the husband has rights of control over the woman. Limited. There's certain limitations, obviously. But it is a form of Bailis. Maybe. So therefore, the question is, where does the original obligation come from? I'm not talking about its origin in the Torah, but what establishes this bond initially, usually? Well, the real who?
Or does Kedushin. The Kenyan.
Kedushin, exactly. When you marry a woman, all of a sudden, one of the consequences of being koina a woman is there are many women that is forbidden to get married. So the concept of erva is initiated by the kinyan of the first woman. The Yavama. So that's what ties this woman really, ultimately, to the whole situation. So therefore, we can analyze that, Well, actually, there are two different kinds of ervas, for instance. There's an erva in terms of also, there's certain types of women that you can't marry. Not because they're related to you. There are women that you can't marry because they are related to your wife, right? Or they are related to the marriage situation, the daughter and all that, right? And there are certain types of arayas that you cannot marry because of specific legal problems, and so on. So the whole concept of an erva means what? What is an erva really? What is an erva?
A woman that's forbidden to you.
To you to do what? You need to finish the sentence.
To marry. Or
To marry.
acquire.
Okay. To acquire. No, not to acquire.
To marry.
To marry. Yeah. So an erva is a woman in which a marriage between you and her is forbidden. And Yavamas then is all about an exception to that rule. That's the klal. You see, so essentially when you learn Yavamas, you're going to be creating a structure. You're going to be looking at all the cases. You're going to be looking at what happens to the Zika, and so on. And you're going to be looking not at the Yavamas, but what about the other? Are there any other ervas that are exceptional besides Yavama? Sure. What else is there? There are other ervas which also you have exceptions, right? What are other ervas that it also deviates? In other words, the concept of erva is removed, where the marriage is no longer forbidden; it is now allowed, which is different than permitted. She's never permitted. She's just allowed. What's the difference between permitted and allowed? Zika allows a marriage. It doesn't permit it. Really. What does that mean when you say allowed, as opposed to permitted?
Versus b'diavad.
No, but he's supposed to marry her.
No, Chatchili has to marry her. Yeah. No, it's not
It's
that.
just allowed. It's permitted.
What's the difference between allowed? It's a rishus. Oh, well, there's a chiyuv here, but it's you can't say it's permitted. You could say it's allowed. It's an obligatory allowance. That word. But what does allowed mean?
Even though there is it's allowed.
Who?
Even though Be'etzim there was it's allowed, and permitted means that
Why is it allowed?
the Torah is
No, that's the origin.
Zika.
No, there's a meritic difference here. Regular woman is permitted. A yavoma is allowed. It's an obligatory allowance, but it's allowed. Why? Because the concept of an allowance means there must be a condition for that allowance to occur. You see? The condition is a husband dies without kids. You take away that condition, forget it. She's an Eishes. So therefore, the Yovam is allowed, even if he's obligated in that allowance, to marry her. That immediately tells you that you need to make sure there's a condition is true. You see? So automatically you have to distinguish between permitted and allowed. Very important. So therefore you now have to ask yourself, what are all the conditions for allowance in a Yavoma? What are the conditions? And there are many, you know. One of them, of course, like I said, well, the woman that he married can't be usher to you because of some other erva. That's a condition. And also the guy can't have kids. What happens if they had kids and the kid died? You see? Those are all kinds of conditions. So essentially, you're going to have to figure out from all the cases, what are the essential conditions, and there are many, that allow this to occur. You see, what am I doing? I'm breaking down the ideas of Yavomas into categories, into havchonas. You see, I'm not even dealing with a prat. There are many conditions. A condition, the concept of allowance, is a klal, that there has to be conditions. Now, it seems simple, like, what's the big deal? You know what I'm saying? Like, well, there's no chiddush here. But there is a chiddush. There's a chiddush in terms of the havchonas, the structure itself separates many of the ideas that seem to be bunched up together. See what I'm saying? Like when you learn your Yavamas, it's like it all piles on top of each other. You know, it's like a 18-story building, all piled up. You need to slice into each different havchana. And then based on the havchanas, each havchana is a part of a different klal. You see, this is what's called structuring. You see? So, there's a lot of stuff that we have. You have the whole concept of when you build the cases, you go from the simple to the complex. Then you see Zika. How does it alter? Then is there a principle of Zika itself? Then there's the origin, you see. And then you need to examine the case. Where do conditions lie? They lie in the case. There is an exact case that the Torah says Zika, and though that case has conditions, you violate the conditions, no exceptions. So the analysis of conditions is really analysis of what? Of the cases, is it not? Right? You're really analyzing the cases. You see, and from the cases, you can see what the real conditions are, and you establish a list of conditions. You see? So it's like it's a building going on here, you see. And that's Yavamas. But Yavamas itself fits into a larger category, or larger structure. And that structure is what? Who? No, immediately, you know, yeah, it's Nashim. But what's
Marriages.
who?
Either rayas or marriages.
Well, it fits into the whole concept of what? Erva. What are other arayas that are permitted, or rather allowed, right? And you have a choisisha, and they also have conditions. You know what I'm saying? Right? What's another erva that's permitted or allowed? A little shaky here, but Eishes Ish. Why is Eishes Ish in Yivonis? What do you call Iguna? What's an Iguna really all about? Isn't it about I hate to say heter, to marry somebody else's wife? Isn't an Eishes Ish an erva? Is she not? Of course she's an erva. That's why Iguna is in Yevomis. Because Yevomis basically treats what? Forbidden women whose marriage relationships are forbidden. And Yevomis goes to all those type of women, you see. So, what?
The husband dies.
He dies, yeah. So the shaila is, what?
Permitted or allowed?
If the husband dies,
She's not an Eishes Ish anymore. Why is it not permitted?
it's
Why would you
not,
call it allowed? She's not married anymore.
probably it's permitted, as opposed to allowed. Because what's the real subject of Eishes Ish? See, a Yavama remains a Yavama. The status of Yavama never leaves. So therefore you need conditions to allow her to marry the Yavam.
But once she does chalitza, so now she's she's also just like she does leave her yavam. She's
No, she's always a Yavama, she's always a sister-in-law, right? But once he does chalitza, there's no zika, and therefore there's no bond. And can he marry her if he does chalitza?
Can he marry her? She still has the hair of Chayzishtai.
Okay.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
Why Eshsach? Yeah. Okay. So really, what happens is the exception is removed, so she's re-established as an Eishes Och. You see? So he's not even, it's forbidden. He's neither allowed or permitted, it is forbidden. But by Eishes Ish, what do we see? Is he allowed to marry an Eishes Ish, Niguna, or is he permitted? What do you think?
Probably more allowed than permitted.
Why is there a condition here?
Could be depends what
Can somebody marry an Eishes Ish because of some condition?
Depends. Well, yeah, could.
Like what?
For instance, he went out to war. It's unclear whether he died or not. He went overseas in a distant land.
So what's
unclear. He hasn't
okay.
returned for 10 years.
So what's the
Unclear
real
if he's allowed or
problem?
not.
So what's the real problem by Iguna?
Whether there's been a true termination of the bias of the Baal and the Isha.
What you really mean is that is she still an Eishes Ish?
Yeah. Okay.
But if she's not an Eishes Ish, right? Can somebody marry her?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is he permitted or allowed?
If she's really an Isha, yeah.
No, if she's not an Eishes Ish, he's
I
permitted.
mean, that's what I'm. Yeah.
So he's permitted, not allowed. There is no concept of allowance by an Eishes Ish. It's permission. So what's the problem with Eishes Ish? How do you get it to be permitted? What's the real problem with Eishes Ish?
Establishing determination of the bias.
Is that what the problem is? What's the real problem of Eishes Ish? That you have this...
Still connected to somebody else.
What?
She's married.
Say again?
She's married to somebody else.
What are you really saying? Her status. Is she still an Eishes Ish or not?
Well, that's what I mean. Does she terminate the bias or not? Is that bias?
That's a roundabout way of saying. It's just simple. Is she or is she not still an Eishes Ish? It's her status that's the suffix here. Now, how do we establish what her status is? By the problem with Eishes Ish is what's her status? Is she still the Erev or not? That's all it is. Right? So then what's the problem here? How do we establish what she is? That's the problem by Iguna. You see? So if we establish that she's not an Eishes Ish, she's permitted. She's never allowed. There's no circumstance where a guy can marry an Ashes Ish because of some condition floating around. You know? I've never heard of something like that. You know?
Oh, what about the concept that there's only one witness to the fact that maybe he died, maybe he didn't, but he thinks he died.
So therefore, what is that? What's the category of
There's
that?
a suffix. There's a suffix.
So what's the category of that? It's not about, right? What's the whole Yevamos deals with what problem by an Ashes Ish? I said the status. Is she or is she not an Ashes Ish? How do we go about establishing the status? What's it called? How do we establish the status? You're the expert in Yevamos.
Determining it.
Who?
So, in the Yevamos, you're saying in general.
Yeah. How do we establish it?
We'll determine if there's a real zika or not. You're saying,
No, not Zika. You're not.
then
I'm
her
talking about
original
Ashes Ish.
marriage,
Ashes Ish.
Was their marriage?
What?
Was the marriage that the original king terminated
So how do we establish that?
with a death certificate?
What is a
So
death
what's it?
certificate called? Yeah, it's a document. What is that called? It's one word.
Raya?
Who?
Raya?
Evidence. Did he say evidence?
You said proof.
Who said that? He's right. Proof. Evidence, same thing, right? You need evidence. So the question is, what constitutes evidence? What is evidence? You see, so the whole problem with Ashes Ish is what? What is she? Is she still an Ashes Ish or not? How do we know? Evidence. So the question is, what constitutes evidence? This is the problem. That all the Igunushad is coming. You know, if one guy, if a guy comes, is 8 echod evidence. You need 2 guys. You know, what happens if it's a guy that really wants, he has an interest in this woman? All kinds of problems, with evidence. That's all. You see? What am I doing, really? I'm just being very clear about what we're learning. You see? Not vague. Many guys are vague, So it's very important to establish clarity. So we get an understanding of what Yevamos really is about. It's all about an erva. And the different arayas, right, that where the status of erva is removed or allowed. That's what it's about. It's about those 2 issues. Erva and the status. How do we allow, in spite of the status, A, or B, how do we move the status? There you are. That's the overall structure. You see what I'm saying? So when you create a structure, what's it going to be under? Erva. And it's going to be 2 concepts here. Which ervas can remain ervas, except you need conditions, and therefore they're allowed, and which ervas, right, do not remain ervas, right, and they're permitted, or they're permitted, really permitted, not because of conditions. So in the classic case of Ashes Ish, it's not a condition, you need evidence or proof. So you have a structure of erva, right, the concept of deviation, so you have 2 lines coming down. One is an erva that remains an erva, but under certain conditions, and then you have a whole lineup of different cases. You have the zika that flows from that, you see. And the other side is the same problem. You have the problem of evidence. You see, it's all organized. Simple now. You know what I'm saying? That's how you organize a difficult Masechta. You need to look at the individual case, you have to analyze, and then you have to put it together, and ultimately come to an idea what exactly is going on here. And once you have that structure to Yevamos, it's incredible.
It's called inducing.
It's called what?
What do you call it?
Take your hand away, can't you? What?
It's called
Inductive.
Oh, yeah, that's induction. Yeah, what I just did is induction. Induction. Because I'm looking at pratim of pratim of pratim, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. What's the klal of all this? You see? So we've reached an interesting idea that the klal really is about erva, right? And there's two situations of erva that we're examining here. The removal of the erva, right, or the deviation from the erva, the status remains the same, and so on. And then we go, what are different, the cases in the Zika, what are the conditions, and over here, what's the evidence? Because each one requires two different things. You see, one requires conditions, and the other requires proof. Simple. You see? Now, I didn't bring down any Rishonim Achronim. Notice? I didn't throw you a Rashba, or a Ritva, or Ramban. I didn't do any of that. Pure thinking, you're able to do this. But you can achieve an incredible clarity by thinking, inductively and deductively, by analyzing and synthesizing. So ultimately what you come out with is a structure of the totality of Yavamas, of the ideas of Yavamas. This is what you walk away with. You do that, you will never forget Yavamas, because it becomes a picture in your mind, especially if you can do a diagram. You can diagram the entire thing, and you never forget. You see? That's Yavamas. That's the power of thinking, to analyze and to synthesize. Did we ever do this? We did? No. Really? Oh well. What are you learning? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot. No, we do it to something else. I hope I didn't say something embarrassing. Cooking. What do? How do we approach cooking? Really? Well, you can jump into cooking, and usually what happens is you get cooked. Or you can approach it and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? There's different Mishnayos and there's a lot of halachas on Bishul that we know, How do I even begin to approach cooking? What would you answer?
You have to establish what's cooking.
What's cooking? What's cooking? Steak?
What is cooking?
Cholent? What?
No.
What's cooking?
What level of heat? What type of thing? Food you're cooking?
Good. What do you? So when you say what type of food, right? That's
liquid in their salads.
What was that?
Just,
If I tell you I'm cooking steak, not steak.
you're baking or roasting or cooking.
Induce that. Give me its klal. You just did. You induced it. You gave me a category. What's the category? I'm cooking cholent. Induce that means give me its category. Go up. What is it?
Preparing food.
Who?
Preparing food. That's food.
Yeah, because I'm cooking. But if I'm cooking, like I say, cholent.
Making edible.
What?
Making something edible.
Okay. What does it mean to make something? Who?
Yeah.
You want to make it? What? So, what's the general category of edibility? See, what I want to do is I need to create a structure before I really get into the halachas. Now, if I don't know anything, it's one thing. But we all know what cooking is. So, we don't want to get lost. This is the problem. If I give you 1,000 pratim, you're lost. But if I don't do that, if I say, let me give you the picture, the box, first, well, guess what? Any idea that you have, you look at the box and say, I wonder where it goes, right? So what you want to do is create a structure first. It's called a tentative structure. You want to be able to look at all these halachas in a general way. So you're going to have to induce. So you just said something, right? What'd you say?
So what's cooking?
What's cooking? Give me the category of what's cooking. What do you think? When you say what's cooking, what's the category? What?
I know a category. Definition.
It means a klal.
Not definition.
No, not a definition. Give me a klal. No, we know what cooking is cooking. We don't need a definition of what's cooking. Not yet. But what is the category to that? Remember, I want to look at the picture. What?
Malacha.
It's an activity. That's true. It's an activity. Okay, you're coming from a... But I want to refer specifically what you're saying, because I want, you said what's cooking. Give me a category of that. What does it refer to? When I say, hey, what's cooking? What am I really referring to categorically or generally?
Preparing food to make it edible.
No, that's my purpose.
They're trying to define the cooking.
No. What?
I'm not understanding the question.
Yeah. Oh, let me give you the answer. Then you see what I'm driving, right? You're referring to the object that's being cooked. It's an object. So therefore, part of the cooking process is an object. You see? So there you are. I've just labeled the category. So when you say what's cooking, what am I referring to? What is the object that's being cooked?
No, what's
So
cooking?
object is a
I was
category.
referring to actually what
What was that?
determining when your food is being cooked.
Say that again?
I was talking about not the object, but
But what?
What do you define as cooking? At what point the temperature or
So what is
or
cooking?
Is there a difference between liquid salt
Okay.
and roasting and baking?
Good.
There's
What is
no-
cooking generally? What is cooking in a general sense?
It's preparing food to heat, making it edible.
It's an activity. That's what it is. Right? Yavoma is not an activity. Yavoma is a state. She is a Yavoma. It's a legal state. See?
Cooked
Where's,
food is a state also.
What was that?
Cooked food versus non-cooked food is also a state.
Yes, but in the process itself is an activity. If I take a pot with food in it and put it on the stove, that's called an activity. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So can we break down activity? Can we break down activity in general?
How does this work? I'm sorry for going off. When
That's
you open,
fine.
When you open up a Mishnah, this
Yeah.
Kira, let's say, third pair, it sounds like the person's going to sit open his Gemara and he's just going to go off into Wonderland.
No, I hope he doesn't.
Let's say, like, what's cooking? What's this? What's this? Like, Kira, Sheisika, B'Kasha, B'Gavava, Kira, they heat it up with the Kash and Gavava. So how does it work? Like, what's Kash? What's Gavava? What's a Kira? What's a Zakua?
Okay. So the first thing you'll try to
How do
do.
you do this when you're learning?
Okay. So the first thing you'll
I'm
do.
like totally lost.
Yeah, I know, because I'm coming from left field. Yeah. The first thing you'll do is.
Yeah.
You'll take the mission starts off with a halacha, right? Yes? Okay. So the first thing you have to understand is what's the halacha, right? What's every halacha? Remember what the definition was? Every halacha has two components. It has a case, situation. It has a conduct. What's the din? That's the two components of every halacha, So the first thing you're going to do is look at the Mishnah and look at its halacha. Okay, exactly what's the situation that the Mishnah says, and what's the din, what's the conduct of this case. So you're actually understanding the halach itself. You know what I'm saying? Fine. Then you're going to take the halach in the Mishnah and say, okay, can I generalize this? You see what I'm saying? So the Mishnah is talking about what type of a case? A cooking case. Right? It's talking about, it's a cooking process. You know what I'm saying? So what I'd love to do is, and this is a specific situation, where the guy cooks, and so on, Well, let's go, what does it say in the Mishnah? What's the first case there?
Kirish is Sikul, B'Kasha, B'Kir, those heat it up with the stubble.
Yes. Yeah.
Next in a layer, Kasha, B'Get, Tash, they're about to put food on it. Gaff is Beitzin, if it's with wood or with leftovers of raisins, grapes,
Whatever, okay.
What? Layita and Ashi Yigrei. Layita, you can't put it down, Ashi Yigrei, Ashi Sefer.
Great.
You clean it out, or you cover it with.
Okay. Now what do we do? How do we analyze this? You see, that's a specific case situation, right? You have a stove, I want to take a pot of food, I want to put it on top of the stove. You know what I'm saying?
So here we don't even deal with cooking. We do Shem Echata. It's something else. It's
No,
it's
no.
a different halacha altogether.
No, wait, no. Well, the question is that we have to ask ourselves, okay, when does this take place? When is this?
On Erev Shabbos.
On Erev Shabbos, let's say, right? So I want to take a pot with food and put it on top of a stove on Erev Shabbos. Yes? Can I do that? That's the situation. Can I do that or not? So the Mishnah says, you can't. You cannot do that. That's one halacha.
Depends what type of oven it is.
No. The second halacha is what? So the first halacha is what? I can't do it. Right? Unless, what happens? There's two things that take place. One of two things. Right? Either I remove all the coal or I cover it with ashes. Right? So what's that called? So what case one is what? You can't take a pot of food and put it on the stove
No, case one you
on
can.
Erev Shabbos.
Case one you can't do it when there's a small item, whatever.
Then the Mishnah says, right, but you can do it if you have,
That's the condition.
that's called a condition. Right? So the case, the basic case is, it is forbidden. The exception is only if there's a condition, and then you are allowed to do it. Right? You're not permitted, you're allowed to do it because there is a condition. Where does the condition lie in? Let's look at this case. So we have the case. We have two cases. From that halacha, two cases emerge. The general, the basic, you can't do it. You cannot go and take a pot, Erev Shabbos, and put it on the stove. Osa. Forbidden. However, under a certain condition, you're allowed to do it. What's the condition? Mishnah says, Grufen Ketuma. Either you remove the coals or you cover it with ashes, let's assume, right?
The first halacha is authority by midrabanan.
No. Yeah, okay.
What's the authority? Is midoraisa or midrabanan?
Well, this is the question. So we have the halacha. We have two halachas here, not one. Although everybody's going to learn one. Right? We have two halachas here, like I just said. The basic case and when the condition applies. Right? So we now understand two halachas. One, why can't I do it? Every halacha has a principle. Why can't I do it? Every halacha, what?
Shem Yechel.
Shem Yechata means what?
He might have to stoke up the coal.
Oh, why will he stoke up the coals? Give me a situation.
He wants it to cook better.
I need a real description story.
The reason why it's also to put a pot on a fire on 4 Shabbos because we're afraid it's not going to be totally cooked. And it comes Friday night, he's going to want to stoke up the coals.
Oh, so the guy's going to come home to his house and he's hungry. Let's really make this a story because that best illustrates why you can't do it. Comes home, right? And the guy, right? He comes home and he's hungry and he wants to eat and he realizes that it's going to take at least another hour to cook. So what does he do? He rakes the coal. What's that going to do? It's going to accelerate the cooking process. Yes? So what? What's wrong with that? What's the Issa b'dava? Right. First we have to identify what's the Issa.
Well, before it accelerates the cooking process, it's havara on the coals.
What?
It's havara on the coals. Before it does anything to the food,
You're going to rake, yeah.
you're raking the coals
So
itself.
havara is one problem. It's a malacha. He's going to rake up the coals and all of a sudden it's havara. The second problem is, it's going to accelerate the cooking process and that's bishul. So here's the problem. It's called the problem. Or, it's really called the concern. What's the concern here? Right? Shem Yechata isn't the concern. It's that if he's Shem Yechata, he's over bishul and havara. That's the problem. Right? And the way you do that is Shem Yechata. So we have halacha here. And what's Shem Yechata? That's called the principle. Why is it forbidden to put a pot on the stove? Right? Because of Shem Yechata, which simply means that he's going to be over 2 malachos. That is the concern. Yes? So what happens now? What do we do? So when the Mishnah now says, if it's Goruf and Kotam, right? What is Gruf and Ketuma? What are you affecting here?
Then it's not going to be saying there's not going to be havara and there's not going to be bishul.
Why not?
If it's garuf, there's no more coal to turn into fire.
So what are you tampering with? The fuel. You need to do something to the fuel. Either you remove the fuel, so it can't rake, or you cover it. So what does that mean? How's that going to help?
Either reminds you to stop.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So what do you call this? So the Chazal are telling you, right, you need to tamper with the fuel, or else you got problems. You know what I'm saying? In other words, it's also to do this. Obviously, it's sicher not awesome in the Torah. There's no halach in the Torah of what? In the Torah, you can walk over and put something on the stove, be Erev Shabbos. It's the Chachamim's concern. Yes, Midrabanan. They have a concern of you being over two malachas. How? Through Shem Yechateh. But the real concern is two malachas. Yes? Fine. So they say, we are now going to offer you what? You can't put something on the stove. The Chazal come and say, okay, and you're screaming to them, excuse me, I'm starving. You can't do this to me. So Chazal think about it, and they have Rachmanis on the guy. And there's, okay, we are going to offer you what?
2 options.
No? Yeah, it's 2 options. But what are the 2 options? What are they essentially?
Solution.
Who?
Solution.
Oh, very good. It's a remedy. The Chazal offer you a remedy to their concern. There you are. And the remedy concerns fuel.
Other remedies too.
Wait, yes, exactly. But I'm saying it's in the class of remedies. That's what I'm trying to show you, that they're offering you a remedy to that concern. So the concern is what? You will be over 2 malachas, yes, through the act of Yechateh, and we are going to offer you a remedy. But this remedy is with the fuel. You need to tamper with the fuel. There you are. There it is. So we now understand. 1. What is the situation? It's called Nesina. Erev Shabbos, I put the pot down. That is the situation. What's the concern? Being over 2 malachas. How? Through Shem Yechateh. Well, does that mean it's over with? No. We will offer you remedies. One of them is to tamper with the fuel. You see, and there you are. That's the halacha, which is now clearly understood. Because we've divided into the situation, the concern, and the remedy. You see? Now we can ask, wait a minute, are there other remedies? Why? Because we now know that gruf and ketum is a remedy. So immediately I've generalized it. Notice what I did? I took what it says, at sheyitein es ha'efa, you know? What have I done? I've induced it to its class. This is a remedy. So therefore immediately I could say, well, that's interesting. Maybe there are more remedies. And the answer, there are more remedies. You see? But look at the difference in clarity that I've generalized it into the concept called a refuah, or a remedy. You see what I'm saying? It's different. You could have said, you know, gruf and ketum, and that's it, you know. But by labeling it, or giving you the 3-part structure to this, the situation, the concern, and the remedy, you see? Look at the difference. You now could look at this in a general way. You see? How? Because now we can take a look. Are there other situations that create concerns, and do they have remedies? I've just generalized. You see? I can now look at Bishul in a whole series of different situations. Do they have concerns? You see? And what's the remedy? You see what I'm doing? It's clearer because I've generalized it. So, what are other situations possible in cooking? Now, let's take a look. Let's be creative here. And you don't need to learn so far. You could do this on your own mind. Why? Because we've all cooked. We all have the experience of having cooked. Give me other situations, and we will analyze, are there concerns and are there remedies? You see what I'm doing? By generalizing it, I now understand much clearer what's going on. And now I can actually begin to organize all this. So this situation was all about what? Nesina, Erev Shabbos, right? Erev Shabbos, yes? To put a pot on the stove on Erev Shabbos. Situation 1. Gentlemen, situation 2.
Put a stove on Shabbos.
Who?
Put a pot on Shabbos.
Beautiful. Situation 2. I take a pot, obviously it's uncooked, whatever, we're not going to deal with that yet, right? And I on Shabbos, right on the stove. Is there a concern? I hope so. You know? And Gedolei Mezuzah, as they say, right? Is there a remedy?
Kli shlishi.
Who?
Kli shlishi.
No, with the pot on the stove.
Take it off.
Who? Take it off. Sure, there's a remedy. What's the remedy?
If it's already gone.
If it's gonna ruin it.
No, that we're not into Messina.
No, it's gone.
I take a pot and I put it right on the stove. On Shabbos, that's the second situation. The concern is, you're over. You're not over Havara, but boy, you over Bishul. Big time. Is there a remedy to this? To this situation? Who?
No, take it off before it gets cooked.
I like that. That's innovative thinking. That's called out-of-the-box thinking. Korbachatas. Either that or skila. That's the ultimate remedy, right? You just kill the guy and you never do it again. That was a permanent remedy. Is there a remedy? Is it possible to take a pot with food in it and put it around on the stove on Shabbos?
Sure. If it's at the point where it's going to be ruined.
Which means, what happens if it was already cooked? And all I want to do is, it's cooked already, right? Can I take it right on the stove? There's no bishul anymore, because it's already achieved its status of being cooked. Wow, that's interesting.
That's called a remedy. It's a different.
That's not a remedy. There's nothing wrong.
What?
It's a bushel concern. It's not a remedy. It's totally it's a different case.
What you understand? It's a remedy because I'm now allowed to. I mean, it should be
Remedy is
allowed.
something that's wrong, and you have an answer for it.
A remedy is something which permits the situation. That's all it is.
It's a different situation.
Is this situation
A
permitted?
better example of remedy would be on top of a pot. Have sekadera. So you have a way to heat it up where you technically put on the fire.
Great.
Sekadera, it's mutter.
That's another remedy.
That'd be a remedy.
Or samach l'chedera. On the top or samach, yeah. Right? But again, the situation is, can I do this? And the answer is yes. If the food is already completely cooked, pashtus, that's a remedy. You should be able to put it right on the stove. However, there's a concern. What's the concern? Who? Again, along come the Chachamim and say, wait a minute.
It's done for Yafala, never say we could get better.
No. No. Who?
Marisayin.
Mixik mavashal. It looks, nobody's going to know that the stuff inside was cooked. Who's going to know that? You know what I'm saying? As far as people are concerned, it's mutter and mavashal, the chatchila. You see, that's the concern of Chazal. So again, we took a situation. What does it look like in the Torah? And therefore the Chazal added a concern, right? And then there's a remedy. So now the remedy is, it can't be michzik mavashal. It cannot look like you're doing it. It has to be some kind of a shinoi here. So you mentioned one shinoi. You see? If you do, that's a condition. If you put it on top of another pot, then obviously people know, well, this is not normal cooking. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, there has to be something. This is obviously, then that person will know, well, you're not allowed to cook l'chatchila, why would you be doing this? Or samach l'kedera, you put it near and so on, What am I doing? You see, that's a second situation. Third situation.
The shlachama?
Who?
The shlachama?
What's that?
For the sun.
No, well, yeah, that is a situation, but I'm dealing with a stove. What's a third situation? What am I doing?
Take it off.
I'm lining up, like I did with the Yavamas. I'm lining up the different situations. It's called the different cooking situations, bishul situations. And I'm taking a look. What's the situation? 2, what's the concern? Whether it be min Torah or midrabanan. And is there a remedy? And ultimately, we're going to have all the situations figured out. And we're going to look at it and say, wow, this is interesting. You see? I see every possible way of cooking. You see? And then once I have the situations lined up, then I'm going to say, I need to generalize this. I need to create a general idea, you see. And therefore, I want to be able to identify all of these situations in a general way, you see. Because then I want to create a bishul structure. And all of these will be cases in that structure. And then any shaila you throw at me, immediately I can answer, because I can say, well, number one, what's the first thing? What's the situation? And then in a given situation, once I see all the pratim, you see, I will immediately analyze, well, are these pratim here? And then you know the psak. The beauty of a generalization is that anybody can come with you in any case, and within the structure itself, where does it belong? Where is it? And as soon as you locate its position in the structure, immediately you ask, well, what's the story? See? So we have two cases so far. Anybody want to give me a third?
Take it off the stove and you return it.
Chazara. Okay. It's been on the stove before Shabbos, right? But I want to take it off and bring it back. That's Chazara. You see. So then what's the problem here? So that's the situation. It's called to reheat something. Now obviously, you cannot, you can't, it has to be there, so there are all kinds of conditions to that, and so on. Because you don't want to be in the position of putting something that can be cooked back on the stove. But here the situation is, can it be reheated if it already was cooked? So again, what's the concern? And is there a remedy? Right?
Mexican Russian again.
Who?
Mexican Russian again.
Yeah, well, yes, it's machlokas, by the way. And what's the fourth situation? Well, no, we did shihiyah, we did bishul chatchila, we did chazara. What's left? Hatmana. What's hatmana?
Insulating.
Who?
Insulating.
Insulating. That's a fancy word. What does insulating have to do with cooking? If I call a guy to insulate my house, is that hatmana? No, so that word is insufficient to describe the case.
Retaining the heat?
Oh, either I want to retain heat, or more, it's really preserve the heat, or
Increase the heat.
I want to increase heat. So in a certain sense, it's almost like bishul. So the question is there a concern here? Yeah. The concern is that if you increase the heat, that looks a lot like bishul to me. And then the question is there a remedy? So essentially, I've established 4 different situations. I've analyzed their concerns, and I've looked for the remedies, you see, which is great. And these are only the particulars. Now I want to generalize the whole thing, you see. I want to create a bishul model or structure. That's interesting. I want to create a general idea of any situation of bishul that's possible. And then I want to look at the halachas that apply to the general situations. Then I can apply it to any specific. You see? That's what's happening here. Was it Marv at 9:30? Okay.
So
That's
next time we're going to take actual Mishnah, right?
Yeah, well, we've done a lot of stuff already, by the way, we'll go into the Mishnah, and so on, And ultimately, to create an entire structure of bishul where everything fits. You see? That's all it is. And a person can do that just by learning the Mishnayos, just by understanding Mishnayos and having, I'm just saying, there's so much that you can do on your own. And then if you have a problem, then you go to the Mefoshim, you know what to look for. You're looking for answers to problems that you developed yourself. Not you have to go to a peers to know what to think about. That's what everybody does, Well, I don't know, I have to think about, so what does he say? No. You need to know what to think about before you ever get to the peers, because he's your answer. He doesn't tell you what the original problem is. Anyway.